and I get a lot of them saying, how do I get into the industry? And you have to have that statistics, because data science is founded on statistics. The only reason the computer part is involved is because it's there to talk about the large amounts of data and complexity of data, that then to go afterwards do statistics on the data and analyze it. So that's just one component, is, having that data engineering and that computer science background, and the statistics is the other component. You need to be able to understand assumptions, hypothesis testing, how these algorithms work, why this algorithm is for this particular data. Yeah, you need statistics.
So my guest today is a 6-time award-winning data scientist and researcher with over a decade of experience in research and analytics, and most recently, a best-selling author for the Data Newbie to Guru. She currently works for a Fortune 100 bank as a fraud-fighting data scientist, developing big data analytics solutions and overseeing their successful deployment. My guest today is Dr. Chantel Perry, fondly known as Dr. C. Welcome to the show, Dr. C. How are you doing today?
Hey, May, I'm doing great, especially since I get to talk to you today. So I'm super excited. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I am so excited to have you on the show today. I remember the first time we connected, I had a blast speaking with you. It was very insightful conversation. So I'm hoping you share some of your insights and experiences within the industry and some of the exciting things you're working on with my audience today as well.
Yes, ma'am, for sure. Let's get it going.
Yay. So why don't we start off? Why don't you walk us through how you sort of fell into the data science sort of career roadmap? What was that moment for you when you decided data was something you were passionate about pursuing?
I love how you said fell into it, because I literally, that was, yeah, like it was like, whoa, this is, because back probably about 4 years ago, I had never even heard of data science at all in my life. And it was so
Wow.
new. I think it was founded in like either 2010 or 2000, can't quite remember, fairly new field. But I honestly just wanted to make cool stuff. Like I was in this world where I was dealing with these small data problems.
Mhm.
And when I got to my PhD program, you do all this exploration and all this research and kind of just find these new ideas and things that are things you might want to work on. And I saw this big data analytics class. And so I took that and I started learning about the world of big data, and like, to think that there's this world where there's more data than you could possibly need, that it would be challenging, was like, what? Like, in working in a small data industry. So to me, that was just so amazing. I was like, this is something that I got to get into. I love a good challenge, and I kind of got into it that way. Granted, my background before that was in statistics and computational mathematics. It kind of just, those were things I like to do, just from a challenging myself perspective. And it ended up that I just kind of fell into this big data science kind of career, because those were the things I enjoyed. So I didn't start off pursuing data science. I more so started off pursuing solving these fun problems that were cool to me. And then that just came with it. So I fell into it.
Do you think that you having that statistics background really set you up? And if someone doesn't come from a statistics background for their undergrad, for example, do you think they're at a significant disadvantage?
God, I hate to have to tell the truth in here today.
You need to hear the truth, so tell us.
I do it because I love them. I'm only doing it because I love you. I used to be on more of the development side before I started my master's, and that's how I got into statistics. I'm getting my master's. Somebody told me it was going to be easy. I was like, oh, I'm going to get this easy degree, which of course it wasn't, but it was fun to kind of see how to automate the statistics and put them together. But I will say this, getting back to the point, if I hadn't have gone that route and done the statistics, it would have been extremely difficult for me to get into data science. And I'm not sure about data analytics from a business intelligence perspective, because when I was a graduate assistant, I did a ton of like data analytics, SQL reporting, and things like that. But the statistics really is what pushed me forward into being able to get that title when I got into the industry. And I get a lot of developers. I actually did a poll probably 2 days ago about for followers on Instagram, just to see who it was, to see how I could better serve them with content.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were developers, and I get a lot of them saying, how do I get into the industry? And you have to have that statistics, because data science is founded on statistics. The
Absolutely.
only reason the computer part is involved is because it's there to talk about the large amounts of data and complexity of data, that then to go afterwards do statistics on the data and analyze it. So that's just one component, is, having that data engineering and that computer science background, and the statistics is the other component. You need to be able to understand assumptions, hypothesis testing, how these algorithms work, why this algorithm is for this particular data. Yeah, you need statistics.
Absolutely. I mean, from what you're saying already, it sounds like there's different types of roles anyway within the data world. Like if you're going analytics, perhaps the need for statistics is, probably not as strong as if you are wanting to be a true data scientist in the true sense of the word, as opposed to a data engineer even. So, I mean, going
Right.
from there, you have a PhD. How valuable do you think it's been for you having that? From the perspective that, we speak to a lot of people that say you don't need a PhD to
Mm-hmm.
become a data scientist. But I'm quite curious and interested, for the people that might actually be considering it, what value has having a PhD provided for you as a practicing
Mm-hmm.
data scientist in industry?
Sure. I'll go ahead and start with the reason why I went to go pursue my doctoral degree. I wanted to move up in higher education administration. I was not, a lot of people see my resume, they think I was a teacher. I was not. I worked on the administration side and institutional research, dealing a lot with data. And in order to move up and be able to publish and, teach and do things like that, you have to have your PhD, basically. Like it's pretty much standard. If you don't, then people kind of look at you funny, right? They look at you sideways. So I said, all right, I'm going to get my PhD. And I was one of those people who definitely didn't want to or didn't think I would. And I will be honest, that's one of the best decisions I ever made because I didn't even know anything about research. But I'll talk more about how it's helped with data science, because it has propelled me in a sense in the field. One of the stories I typically tell people about is when I started working at USAA, I came in as a SaaS consultant. I was a contractor. I didn't work there full time. And they hired me on full time, and they offered me on in like 2 to 3 months, which is kind of like crazy because it's usually 6 months. But I didn't, it was funny because I almost didn't want to do it because you make more money as a contractor. But I went ahead and I took it, and I was on a team, and we were all decision science analysts. Where I work at, it's decision science analyst, then the modeling analysts get a little bit more money, and then the data scientist is like the highest analytics title you can get. But you have to go up to a panel, you have to go through a process for it. And in my area, enterprise security, where I work, which is like 600 people in the whole area, nobody had data science titles. So basically we had to do this weird kind of like thing where we were marketing ourselves and trying to get these titles to our department. So once they give you a title, you can give it to anybody in the department. So basically we had to go up and like basically fight for these titles. And because I had a PhD and because my colleague had a PhD, we were the only two people that were eligible for the titles at all. If you didn't have it, you weren't getting put up for it. Basically, we have one person who did get it years after we got it, and he's super talented, way more talented than I'll ever be, and he's done great in his career. But unfortunately, due to the fact that the PhD was the seller in getting those titles to the department, that was what did it for us. And I ended up being the first person with the data science title in the enterprise security at USAA, which was crazy because I hadn't been there as long as anybody, hadn't even really been on that many machine learning projects, right? So it was like I'm getting something that I'm probably didn't earn work-wise, but because of my criterion qualifications.
Wow, that's an
Yeah,
interesting flip from a career planning perspective, that it can really position you to stand out from the crowd, essentially.
it did. Yeah. So I hate to be like the bearer, but I do think you can get into the field without the PhD. I definitely think that it elevated it for me in my use case.
And what do you think they valued about you having the PhD? What was different about someone that had, because you've obviously cited that you thought there were other people that were extremely talented that could be data scientists, but for some reason the company valued that PhD. What was it, do you think, they were looking as a proxy in terms of their decision making as to why the PhD was important?
Well, first of all, my colleagues are data scientists. I don't know what's up with this title thing or why they're being so weird about this at my job. But they're data scientists, and many of them are better statisticians and better modelers than I'll ever be in my life. They'll run circles around me, like just straight up. The PhD component is that you can go out, do research, and prove that what you've done is sound. You can prove that you have a sound statistical model, a sound algorithm, and you can present that to like our model risk management team that we have. It's really hard to get through them, but you're able to go out, find expert research and scholarly articles and things like that, and be able to actually prove what you've done is factual and it's sound. So I think that that's really what stood apart with the PhD, is that you're showing that you know how to do research and that you're able to explore new things and innovate, because research is all about creating this gap in the body of knowledge and making this new innovative thing. But in order to say, oh, this is innovative and I made this new thing, you have to be able to prove that by showing you can do research to find that gap.
Right, right. That makes sense. So, whilst we're on that topic of doing research and looking for sort of innovative approaches to things, you also do some consulting work. So, can you talk a little bit more about that and some of the interesting projects you've been involved in?
Yeah, so I do consulting on and off. It just depends on who's asking, really. But this past year, I got to do a really cool project that we're wrapping up for my company, Stats and Apps. We're working with Eric D. Coleman Financial Group, and we built a cash flow application for him. And so that was really interesting because I had never really been on something where I had done it on my own, like with my own company in this sense, where we took like this spreadsheet with all these crazy formulas and we put into this application for him. But honestly, back when I was doing more consulting with graduate students who were going into consulting and things like that for themselves, I worked with a lot of like nursing doctoral students, and I loved working with them doing statistical analysis for them, helping them get through their dissertation defense with statistics. Oh my God, that was the best, because it was like they knew, it was almost like they knew statistics and they knew what they were doing, but they weren't confident in it and they just weren't sure about the order things went in. But like, man, it, to see them kind of go from like not even being comfortable with the computer to like going in SPSS and building their own statistical tests and stuff like that, it was just like really cool to kind of see the transformation and be able to help them, and they'd be so excited to get through their defense. So I really loved working with them.
Fantastic. One of the ways I sort of came across your profile was, I think, on one of your social profiles, it's Takeover Tech, hashtag Takeover Tech. And I was just really interested, what is Takeover Tech all about? What are you trying to achieve through that? Can you talk a little bit more about that as well?
Yes. So with Takeover Tech, I'm trying to kind of solve two challenges. Right now in big data analytics, it's just this huge world of just problems that need to be solved. And there's just not enough skilled people to solve them. So I'm trying to more so inspire more people and help get people the skills that they need to get into big data and solve these big data analytics challenges with as much, as we use media and technology and things like that. It's just going to get bigger. Problems are going to get harder, so we need more people. But even more than that, we need to diversify the field, right? Because when you don't, you have this group of people who's building these biased solutions for these problems. And when you have biased solutions, then they don't work for everybody and everybody can't use them. So also diversifying tech in a sense, and more so getting women into the field than anything for me at the moment. Like women empowerment, making sure that women feel confident, giving them, the confidence to speak up at work and to, get out there and do these projects even when they feel that they, can't, because we just have that going on with this sometimes. So really just trying to diversify the field and diversify technology.
Mm, very interesting point you raised there, because I'm always curious to ask this question with data scientists. How do you approach sort of resolving bias in the models that you're building? And it's interesting that you've already sort of answered that in a way. Is one way to do that is by increasing diversity. That actually will in some way influence, you know, how we build these models. But on that note of diversity, is there any sort of quantifiable data, like apart from the fact that yes, it helps us build better models, does it actually result in companies, you know, quantifiably being more profitable even? Is there data to support that? And are
Mm-hmm.
there additional reasons to support the fact that diversity isn't just like an ethical or social thing that companies should be interested in, but
Mm-hmm.
actually it's a very sort of savvy business strategy to really, really understand and be able to implement well in an organization?
Yeah, I think that when it comes to organizations trying to implement diversity, they have to be really cognizant of what success even looks like from a diversity standpoint to even know what kind of data to collect. Because I know a lot this year, especially, there's been everybody's got a DNA and I movement popping up, right? So everybody's doing diversity and inclusion, but what does really the success look like? And I see a lot of people who are on the minority side saying like, oh, well, they set up this program, but like they haven't done anything, or we have, I'm on the team, but nobody listens to my ideas. So I think part of that is not just the numbers, but
Mm,
also being able to see solutions that are for different types of people working for different types of people. So if I'm going to build an AI bot and it can't recognize a Black person from an animal or something weird like that,
mm,
are we really diverse? Like, have I really gone through and made sure that this was a study with integrity, reliability, trustworthiness? Have I really gone through what a researcher should do to show that there's no bias in my study? Have I really questioned myself against people that think differently from me? Have I really let somebody else look at my solution and taken their ideas into account? So part of that is on the onus of the person kind of like in charge, or these companies that are in charge. But I think that, unfortunately, there has to be some kind of incentive for a lot of people to do these types of things. And we'll have to just see how it goes.
mm. Every little bit it helps, right?
Yeah.
So let's go back to what you do day to day as a data scientist. So you work within sort of fraud detection, enterprise security. Now, like with the work you do, is there ever an end point? Do you ever get to the point where you've solved every type of fraud there is? And what I'm actually getting at there is, does the flavor of fraud change every year? Is the work that you do, can it be taken and applied to people in a different country? Or, I sort of fill us in a little bit more about what's involved in that industry and how it sort of grows and develops.
Yes, fraud trends change all the time because there's new like banking products that come out. Zelle is one that's a really rough one right now for us to get around, because I think it's something weird where people can pull out like $1,000 without even having to check with anybody. So like fraudsters are taking advantage and like, oh, let me hack this, pull out $1,000, send it over, da 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 da.
Oh,
And
okay.
oh god, we have some crazy, man. We got some. There's my favorite ones are the passion crimes, where like somebody falls for somebody in a country, like they
Oh,
fall in love and then they just give them all of their money, and then like there's and you're like, how do you solve this with machine learning? There's just things that, yeah,
I mean, that still happens even without the internet. I know a family member that they were, they were much
Oh,
older and they
terrible.
got scammed by a phone call just saying, we're the bank and we're trying to
Yep.
make sure, they don't touch the money. So we need to move the money to another part of your account. And unfortunately, they did get scammed even without the internet. And I think people are just playing on psychology, because I do wonder, why does this keep happening? Like,
They're
I
so
heard about this
good.
happening, 10, 20 years ago, and it's still happening. And I guess it increases in, the trendiness of how it happens and the flavors it happens in. But there is a
It's
play on
so
psychology.
they're the girl. these people, we go to our 9 to 5 and we work on fraud. These people are working 24/7. Okay. They're sitting here opening up accounts, building stuff up for a year just to commit fraud. Like, it's
Wow.
crazy. There's certain things that almost you feel like the technology can't even get around it. It's so crazy. My favorite psychological one right now that's been killing us. I think all the banks are getting hit by this one. You'll love this. So what's happening is, you know how you have the one-time passcode? They can send you a code. You type it in. You tell them on the phone or whatever. So what's happening is, the fraudster will do some crazy activity.
Mm-hmm.
They'll call the member and then act like they're the bank. And then somehow they also have the bank on the other line and they're acting like the member in the middle. So they have the bank asking them for stuff. They put the bank on hold. They get the customer, get the stuff. They put the customer, like the person they're doing the victim on hold. So they're just passing it back and forth. So like different stuff like this is crazy because you think like, how in the world do you solve these kinds of issues, and trying to get around that. So we're currently like just trying to solve issues that are
That's really
insane.
interesting. How do you think things like blockchain will help then? Because it sounds like, all these measures, one-time security, one-time this, like you have like a million passwords you have to remember, then you save it to your cookies, then you share it with this device. There is so much. So, it does make you think perhaps, there is a need for elevated security in the sense of having a blockchain sort of solution potentially. Is that something that, you thought about in your line of work, and how do you think that might impact things as data continues to grow and these things continue to grow?
Now, I'm not a blockchain expert, so I don't really know much about how it would help. But boy, is there one guy on the team that is. And
Oh,
he talks about it all the time. So I'm pretty sure my buddy Dan is going to come up with us a nice blockchain solution sometime soon. But I don't really understand it in depth enough to really comment too much on it. I just hope that we can figure something out soon, because in these big organizations, the ship kind of turns a little slow at being able to build things. So that's a big challenge too.
yeah. And I guess also with everyone working from home more, probably we'll see a shift from companies increasingly not having physical devices given to employees, but moving
Hmm.
more and more things to the cloud. And then everything is just more vulnerable in the cloud. So, I mean, it sounds like if you want to be a data scientist in fraud security, there's going to be a ton of jobs for you in the future, because there is so much that's moving towards things that do require that kind of protection more and more.
Yeah, they're looking for y'all, especially the government, because they can't get enough data science people that have a cybersecurity background and fast enough. So they're out there. There's tons of jobs like that out there, and it's just the problem's just getting worse, like you said. But the thing that's interesting is they're starting to get very strict. I mean, you know about GDPR and all those things, and California has their own protection acts, but
Mm.
they're starting to get extremely strict, and it's almost to the point where it's like a battle between, of course, ease of use and security, because we have a lot of these big data challenges as it is trying to collect it, and then we're just moving to the cloud because insecurity, because we just found out, okay, this is how we're going to secure things. This is okay. All this is up to code. All this is up to snuff. But it's taken us this long in our area to even start thinking about moving and migrating to the cloud just off of security,
Mm.
period, and compliance.
Mm. Mm. So let's talk a little bit more about the book that you recently launched, Data Newbie to Guru. What is that all about, and what prompted you into writing that as well?
Oh yeah, so Data Newbie the Guru is basically like an entry book to help people understand just data from a basic perspective, and understand like kind of how database management works and collecting data, and even gets into some light data analytics, understanding how to look at data to solve problems. And I used some scenarios from higher education that I had run into back when I used to work in higher education as a business intelligence analyst.
Mm.
And the reason I wrote the book was because I started to get a ton of people who were not experienced in tech or statistics at all, who were
Right.
reaching out to me and were like, "Oh my God, can you teach me? Can you tutor me and do these things?" And unfortunately, I don't have the time or capacity to reach the masses.
Mm.
So this was for those people who needed something that was affordable, that could help them get up to snuff super quick and help them get their foot in the door quickly. And I wanted them to have something visual too. Because I
Yeah.
looked at a bunch of SQL books and I was like, man, there's
And
not enough visuals or colors. Like,
what makes your book different from the myriad of SQL books out there on the market? And I know one thing that jumped out to me was how colorful and visual it was. So if you're a visual learner, you're going to love the book, essentially, in terms of learning SQL.
I think probably the color, I think the simplicity, the walkthrough exercises that we have on there. I forget, I did like a whole, I mean, the fact that I wrote it, I don't think there was any other books by Black people, women out there that were SQL books. Also, it was from an analytical perspective rather than a development perspective. So I'm sure there's some like data engineering theories and things like that that are not in this book because that's not how I learned
Mm.
data management and learned to get into data engineering. But there's going to be like a different perspective than what you might see from a book that's from somebody that's purely information technology. So I think that to have that was something different that I thought about that would be helpful as well.
What kind of background do you think then it takes to thrive in a more data analytics type of career track from your experience?
Somebody that's like curious and problem solving and not afraid to kind of like, get in there and mess some things up. Well, not like things that don't need to be messed up, but get in there and run some programs and be okay with like having a bug and solving the problem. But somebody who's up for more challenging things and kind of wants to innovate. Because I see people who, um, if they need very structured, repetitive work, that it usually doesn't pan out too well for them in the analytics field. Or they face a problem and they get stuck and they don't feel like they can go to Google or Stack Overflow or spend,
Right.
a couple hours trying to fix it. They have a rough time. And also people who are very good at taking something that's more complex and kind of like making it more basic for the business people and business stakeholders, because you have to take these analyses and you have to come up with some type of interpretation and recommendation, and you have to take that and carry that to some business leader typically so they can make a decision and take a subsequent action off of it. So you've got to be able to explain it pretty straightforward because they don't have a lot of time to sit around and do the analysis themselves. They don't want to know everything you did. They want to get straight to the point and figure out how to solve their problem.
Right, right. It's interesting you talk about decision making and being able to sort of affect that with what you're doing. A question that I saw recently come up from our audience was, is data scientist a career track that takes you to the C-level? So essentially, can data scientists potentially be the future CEOs of companies? Because a lot of what they're doing does seem to sort of mirror what people do at the C-level. So interested in hearing your thoughts there.
Yeah, I definitely do. I think that it helps a lot, especially with like having your own company or making decisions of where you need to move forward and doing research and being able to analyze data, because typically kind of like what's the best strategy or what's the best move for your company just from being able to analyze data. And when you can't and you're working purely off of emotion, sometimes those things don't really work out well for leaders. And in some cases they may, but in a lot of cases, where you have to be strategic and have a company and you're helping it move towards a particular mission, it doesn't. So I
Right.
do think that analysts do make good C-level executives. I think that I actually just talked to a C-level executive over at my company. Gosh, I can't remember his name. Terrible. But he used to be in analytics, and he said one of the reasons they moved him up is just because of how he was able to see the big picture of things and be able to take and analyze that picture and make a decision on that helped them be successful. So I definitely think that that would be a good next step if you're in analytics and you're trying to get to
Right,
the
right.
exec
Now,
status.
a big part of that is being able to storytell effectively. And you hear
Hmm.
this is one of the attributes that makes a good data scientist. What is storytelling to you? How much of it is really just being able to bend the data to say what you want it to say? And what worries me about that is you can actually influence decision at a high level, to go down a path that might not necessarily be the best path to go down. Um, how does one go about developing their storytelling skills? What can you actually do, especially if you're someone at the undergrad level and you're thinking about going into a career that's data related? What can you do to develop your storytelling skills?
Sure. I think when it comes down to it, there's two things that pop up in my head right away. And that is one of the things I learned when doing research was talking about your limitations
Mm.
in your research area, which is the same with any project, right? You've got a limited amount of time, you've got a limited amount of data, it's for a specific group, and those things need to be made known. They need to be made known so people don't expound or start thinking like, oh, this is for everybody. This data means it's for everybody in the company when it's just for the business department or it's for the marketing department. You have to be very specific and set your story up to talk about your demographic before you even begin talking about the statistics of things. I think that when you go and you start telling a story about statistics in a general sense, I begin to question you already, like, well, who does this apply to? Because you couldn't have surveyed everybody, you know? So you have to start thinking in a manner like that. How am I going to expound upon the demographic and what limitations I had before I went and collected and analyzed this data? I also think that visualizations can also help or hurt you.
Mm.
I think there's an expertise to data visualization, though, that people really need to get more into. I see some graphics out there that can be very misleading if you don't know much about graphics or you're not really paying attention in depth. So I think that you can use data visualizations to your advantage, but you always have to make sure you're telling the truth with them, that your scales aren't skewed and you're picking the correct imagery to convey what you mean. And hopefully it's not just what you mean, but what's fact. So,
Right. I feel like a lot of the data that's out there about, for example, COVID at the moment, people come up with different types of visualizations that say very different thing. You know, one person saying, "Well, this is my view of deaths per day or how well we're doing. This is my view of cases." But like, it just depends on how you want to
yes.
slice and dice the data and what story you choose to tell, what narrative you want to sort of push, in terms of what your goals are. So
Yes.
it just seems like, I mean, it makes you realize there's very much an art to data science as there is the science behind what you're doing. And it's a blend of both, right? So
Right.
I know that you're doing so many interesting projects. Like, what is the most sort of interesting out of the box ideas you're working on at the moment from a data perspective? Can you just share maybe one or two of those? Some of them are really cool. So I would love to share some, some of
Oh my God.
the.
Right now, and I always say it like this, it's like I'm getting into generative art. So I'm exploring generative art, which has been the weirdest yet the most fulfilling thing for me at the moment. Like my coding skills as I get further into my career diminish some because I work more with managing projects and leading things now. And so I get probably between 2 and 4 coding hours at work a week, maybe 8 if I'm lucky.
Yeah.
So I want to get back into coding, but in a way that I really enjoy. I used to really be into fashion and sketching and design and all these things. And I used to have a company where I would make like shorts for working out, and I could like really be creative. And I felt like I was really missing that. And I started to look into generative art. And so right now I want to start learning how to code in generative art. And my goal is to do something about, it's going to be like something around like Black women and like probably something with their hair and the move and the flow. I was thinking of doing something with braids and generative art, or even just, just the elegance that we have that doesn't get appreciated in a computational manner, like I think probably some other different types of things do. But I mean, I have so many random ideas, it's not even funny. But right now, I'm just exploring that, and I've come across some really interesting art pieces and sculptures, and even some musical pieces. So.
Interesting. What is generative art? Just for those that might be listening that don't fully understand.
Sure. Generative art is basically like algorithmic art. Basically, you're coming up with an algorithm that draws on the computer given some data set. So it's typically some either random or it's using some data like brain waves or music frequencies, and it's kind of using that to create its own visualization. So something typically you aren't going to expect or know what the art is going to look like before you start.
Very interesting. So, I mean, I wonder how would that influence even just people doing art naturally? Like, is it something where, it sounds fascinating. Is it something where how much control does the algorithm have compared to what the human has in that situation?
And that's the beauty, right? So there's like what I'm reading is like sometimes I read them like, God, this is so random. But I'm like, what they picked these data points, but they could have picked any data points from a sound wave. There's so many different parts of like if you were modeling music in a visual sense, there's so many data points and elements of music, the bass, the frequency. I don't know all the names of everything, so but there's a ton of elements. So, and there's a ton of different ways you can visualize them, right? So you choose it, but at the same time, it's like almost like you don't know what it's going to look like until you pick the data points, and you can switch them and do different things. So you do have some control, but at the end of the day, I guess the data, and depending on whether it's going to be like an AI based learning algorithm or just a random algorithm, it might be that the computer is creating a lot of it given the, whatever it's learned on its own. So the control varies from what I see.
Fascinating. For you, what do you think are the most sort of exciting trends that are coming into the industry, or you're hoping to see in the industry for the future?
I'm hoping to see more of like trying to figure out how to put this. I guess I'm hoping to see more of like this movement with Black women in the data analytics industry. That's a really big trend that I'm seeing right now, probably because I follow so many on like Instagram and things like that. And I'm starting to see them kind of inspire and influence a lot of young ladies. So what I'm hoping comes from that is more solutions that are scientific and data related that make sense to people like me growing up. Because I feel like every time I would crack open a book or every time I would look into something, it seemed like it was always either something that just didn't ever relate to me or something that just wasn't interesting. So I'm hoping to see more things that interest me. Like one of the things I've thought of is like for my next book, I want to do like statistical analytics, but have like a data set that's like pop culture and Python or something, something that's our generation, but you can kind of put it with the technical side so you can understand it better or be more into it and be more willing to learn it.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I saw a guy recently, a young, I think scientist, or perhaps he's a studying medical student, and he basically wrote a book where he shows you what different diseases look like on Black skin because it's so different. And there's a statistic off the top of my head, I think it's like 40-something% of medical professionals that graduate say they don't actually know what certain illnesses look like on Black skin, just purely from the fact that they haven't seen it. They haven't experienced it during the course of the training program. So he's a young male, young Black male, and he's put that together. And I thought it would be so fascinating if someone actually was able to computerize that for him in some way so that it's digitized in a way that, you know, it's even more powerful, more people can use it, and just giving people alternative data sets in the true sense of the word, that they
Yes.
can build more robust models and systems that actually help more and more of the population. So I thought that was great. I think there's just so many of those opportunities that are just there ready to be sort of, you know, taken and, you know, digitized, or, you know, build some sort of technology model around it that becomes even more powerful for the future. There's just so much you can do, right?
And it doesn't even just have to be like, I feel like there's a lot of other cultures, especially like Hispanic cultures. It's
Yeah.
rare that I even see a lot of like Hispanic coding groups until I met my friend at work, Candace, and she was showing me some different Latina coding groups. But there's so many groups that have like no tech stuff at all, no analytics, like courses out there and things that are geared for them, no research that's super just geared for them. And so it's crazy because that's out there, but we need more people who care about it and who are interested in it.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're doing amazing work to help that cause, certainly, and it's definitely being felt, and, you know, we're seeing
Oh,
the
thank
impact
you.
of all of that. So very well done to you. I mean, we've talked about some amazing things you've done, and people can obviously go online and see more of your work. What for you in your journey, though, has been sort of, you know, the most challenging obstacle to overcome, or even your biggest rejection, really?
I'll need to really think about the rejection one. I think that okay, I want to talk about this in a way that's okay. I'm just gonna talk about it.
Go.
So I think that for as far as my biggest rejection goes, um, I got fired back in 2016 for doing something that I truly believed that was the right thing, and it was a lot for me to do what was right in a sense in my job. Granted, my boss got fired too, so it was nice that we both got let go together. But I'll give you some more background on that. But knowing that I'm true to myself and knowing that I did the right thing and I came out better at the end of it was the big thing. But basically, what happened is, and I can't really say who it was, but you can look it up on LinkedIn if you want to.
No, we're gonna.
Um, and see where I used to work back then. Um, there was a school that was giving out some degrees to people who had never stepped foot on that campus. And my job was to report data to an institution, to a state institution, about enrollment, graduation numbers, things like that. So I had to do my job, which was to report this fact, knowingly that this was going to get me in heat because once I did that, that program was going to lose funding. People were going to be upset with me. And what was going to happen happened. So I really had to talk to my boss like, hey, this happened, and this is probably what's going to stem from it. And basically his supervisor let him go, and then the month later I was let go. And it was a big battle because they basically try to make it seem like I couldn't do my job well, and they wouldn't even try to give me unemployment. So I had to like battle for unemployment, but thank God I knew I was getting let go. So I had piled up all my documentation and showed like, hey, I'm doing 30% more work. I'm running circles around these people in this department. You can't say that I'm not doing my job and I don't deserve my money. But it also was a sign to me that the politics and higher education that I had been dealing with for years wasn't for me, and I couldn't mentally do it anymore. And the funniest part about it was I got in trouble for basically showing an internal threat and doing the thing that was right to do at a place they have good people working there, but there was also some bad eggs working there. And then I got another job making double like 6 months later. And I was on internal threat monitoring. So I got paid to find bad people inside the company. So I was like, wow, this is great. Like,
Amazing. That's,
yeah.
wow, that's like, I mean, it's interesting. I'm always fascinated about the whole aspect of ethics in data science in and of itself. And I know, you know, it sort of feeds a little bit into bias in modeling as well to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that as more and more people, you know, they pick up Python and they're data scientists or whatever the case is. As we get more and more people coming into the industry, if we're not thinking consciously about the ethical side of things, people are going to be building stuff really quickly that are going to have massive influences on decision making. You know, the most basic one being, you know, the whole jail system, you know, should someone go to jail or not based on the model we've built. We think they should, even though this data is like 120 years old or whatever the case is. I think it's something that's really important to bear in mind. And I think more people need to be talking about it, because we're going to get to the point where we have all these recruits that are, you know, extremely strong Python developers. They build models, they get stuff shipped, and no one's thought about the fact that, you know, this is something that's going to be growing in importance and really affecting our lives on a day-to-day basis. Like, at the point we are now, I feel like people are so much more open to technology innovation because of COVID, and it's great, but I think we should be cognizant of the fact of what threats can sort of come out of this in terms of what we are adopting and what we're building. And I just think it's really interesting that, you know, it isn't at the forefront of any course to think about ethics in data science. And I think it needs to be, not just as a social responsibility, but it's going to be affecting our lives in a very big way for the future.
They are definitely establishing like AI ethics committees that are at the national and the international level, because it's getting to a point where we're like one just not well thought out idea away from something crazy going on, right? So I think that there is a lot going on with ethics. I don't keep up with it probably as much as I should, but I know in my organization, they do a wonderful job of having a legal committee who is looking into data, ensuring that we are not making any decisions based upon like different demographic factors that could get us in trouble with like equality or EOC or other different federal regulations. And we're not like, you know, I think we have OSHA where there's like restricted countries and things like that that we can't work with. So they also make sure that we're, you know, weeding out and not dealing with countries who might be terrorists and things like that. So there are different, you know, companies that do so, but there are companies that don't. And I was at a company that didn't. And, you know, all I can say is try to be cognizant of what you're doing with your data and be ethical as best that you can. Because I mean, I mean, you can't 100% be great every time, but be true to yourself. I mean, it cost me my job at that time, and at that time I thought I would absolutely die. But at the end of the day, I can always say I was true to Chantel, and I didn't do anything that God's gonna look at me sideways for. Because you know, I just don't believe in doing certain things that, you know, are illegal or unethical in a sense like that. That just was, it's not something I stand for.
Quite a few boundaries, didn't it? Right. So if, you know, I'm listening to this podcast, you know, regardless of background, what would you know, what advice could you give to someone wanting to pursue a path similar to yours, in a true sense of the word, be it wanting to be a data scientist, wanting to be able to get involved in projects on the side, and really wanting to make an impact in the industry? What have been sort of the most sort of poignant lessons, and what you would advise someone to consider and, you know, think about?
Sure. I would say that the thing that's helped me the most is probably picking like something that I was really, really good at that kind of carried me through my career. At the time, it was like SaaS wasn't like the big thing, but I knew that being a SaaS consultant and being the best SaaS consultant was going to help me through my career. So I think when people really concentrate their focus in a particular industry and being really good at something that somebody needs in that specific industry, it makes the job search extremely, so much easier. It makes your research super easy. It just makes exploration easy. So when you do that, make sure you pick something you're passionate about and that's fun. I will say I did like working in higher education, but boy, I got bored after a while. So now that's why I'm kind of like rebranding and all that kind of stuff. But I think that making sure that you know your audience, you know what your service you're selling to that audience, and then, you know, that from there you can easily market yourself and understand what skills you need to learn and what you need to do,
Mm-hmm.
if
And
that makes sense.
you also Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Okay.
Also have a very strong network, within the industry. How have you been able to sort of, connect yourself, even virtually speaking, with other data scientists? Because that, I think being surrounded by like-minded people or people on a similar path can be helpful as well. I'm not saying someone should come up to you and say, can you be my mentor? But, how would you approach or advise someone to approach trying to sort of connect themselves up virtually within the industry?
First, I would definitely say there's nothing wrong with asking people to be your mentor. Unfortunately, for me at the moment, I have a lot of young ladies and young men that I'm mentoring, so I can't really take on any other people individual at the moment. But there are people out there that do mentor and do want to help. I remember actually the chief data analytics officer at General Motors reached out to me last year because I was active on social media. I would say being active on LinkedIn has been a big deal of being able to connect with new people and find new people, as well as on Instagram, and reaching out to people and asking them, to possibly partner with you on a project you're working on, even a small scale where you're like, we're doing this right now with the podcast and we're talking and we're vibing, and I can tell like we're really like minded because we're both on platforms trying to get the word out there and trying to help people. So reaching out and saying, hey, let's do something together, that's just something simple that you can do to help both, not to help you both reach your mission. But even if it's just somebody that's not somebody, you want people that are of course more successful than you, that what you want to do, who have achieved what you want to achieve, but you also want people who are like trying to do what you're trying to do at the same time you're trying to do it, because you motivate each other too. So if you can find accountability partners and buddies, then that's also great. So don't be afraid to reach out to people, but reach out with purpose. Do not be like, hey, what's up? You want to be like, hey, I saw your profile. I researched you. I know you did this. I love this video. Give them a compliment, and then talk about what you're trying to do. See if they'll help you then. But just like, hey, sup, page looks cool. Want to help me? Like, that's not,
Right.
nobody wants to deal with that. It's true. It's true.
I'm sure those types of people get a ton of those and they're like, no thanks.
So be strategic.
So I'm curious as well, Dr. C, like what for you has been the most influential sort of person or book or ideas even along your journey? Like, are there any sort of call outs you could share with us?
Oh God. My aunt Bonnie, she owns the B Suite, which is a venue. She owns the Collective Events, which she does like weddings and stuff like that. And she's had her own business for years. She has 100% always been supportive of me and always been the one to call me up and say, hey, did you get your LLC? How can I help you with this? Here's some tips on how to market this. Here's some tips on this, some blogging things you could do to give to people. Like, she is rocking it and killing it. And buddy, anytime I need somebody, she's always like been the one to help me. And even right now, while I'm trying to rebrand and explore this new like fashion and pop culture meets technology side, she's been giving me all these creative ideas, and I've never been happier. Like when I talk to her, like the ideas just flow, and we can just bounce ideas off of each other for days. So I would say my aunt has been probably the single most influential woman in my life, and we're not even in the same field, but in my life when it comes to business and going for what you want to do, even if it's different and other people don't see what you see. Like, she'll tell you straight up like, oh, they ain't gonna get it, they don't know. Like, she's definitely like one of the most confident people, so I love talking to her.
Awesome. She's sounds like she's had a massive influence on your entrepreneurial
She's
bug and
amazing.
journey, right?
Yeah. She's amazing.
Fantastic. Are there any resources you'd recommend just generally? It could be life resources, could be data resources, any things that help Dr. C be who she is?
Yes, gosh, I wish I remember this author's name. But there's this book called The 5 Second Rule, which really, really this year helped me out so much in everything from I remember at one point I was having it really rough at work, and like I was working on all these documentation things that everybody had to work on, but I was getting so tired of like writing documents and sending them to our model risk management team, and we were all getting our documents rejected and getting them sent back, but it was taking a real rough hit on me. And the 5-second rule kind of like helped me stay motivated and helped me kind of like, even when I was tired, just keep pushing. And I also kind of like learned from that to start working much more on my confidence. So then I would look in the mirror and say stuff to myself like, "You're the best model risk management document writer out there." Like I would say stuff, and I giggle, but it would make me feel good in the morning before I would go and do my work and stuff like that. So
fantastic. Well, I'll get that book and I'll link it in the description of this.
for sure.
And our viewers also get a copy of your book, The Data Newbie to Guru. It'd be great to link that as well.
Yeah, if you go to www.dn2g.com, which is Data Newbie to Guru acronym, then you can find it there. Or you can go to drctakeover.com, click on the books link, and it'll take you there, and you can grab either the ebook or the physical book. We still got some physical copies that we're going to be signing and handing out. So
okay, fantastic. And where can our viewers connect with you generally? What's the best platform you love to sort of connect with people on, generally interested in data science, and all things data?
anything that's like not Facebook. So probably LinkedIn.
Facebook.
LinkedIn's a good one, Instagram, and even Twitter. But I'm never on Facebook. Do you use Facebook?
I do, because I still have some friends in England that just prefer Facebook. Yeah. I don't know why. Some people just prefer Facebook. Very old school. It's so funny saying Facebook is old school. I mean, it's not like that old.
It's like the I don't know. My mom took it over for me. Once she got on there, I got off back in the day when I was like, "Oh, they looking at my pictures. Let me log off."
Yeah, I think moms still love it. Definitely.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not quite into TikTok. I mean, the odd comedian here and there, but in terms of posting content, I'm not quite there.
Yeah, that TikTok is a hard one. I made an IG reel yesterday for the first time. Buddy, I tell you what, the kids can have it. I'm getting old.
Gosh, everything is too fast. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, Dr. C. Thank you so much. Wish you all the best with the book as well. Look forward to hearing about the second one as well.
Oh, yeah.
2021. And looking forward to seeing all the exciting things you're doing in the industry and the wonderful impact you're making. It's been awesome chatting with you.
Yes, likewise. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. Have a great day. Take care.
You too.